How many people have heard of Vipassana meditation before? Okay, so we've got a few. And we've got Laurie, who's actually taken part of a course in Vipassana meditation, so that's perfect. Well, the Vipassana meditation actually goes back far, far, even beyond the Buddha, who really made it famous, but it's into the Veda tradition in India, and although it might not have been well known at the time, it was a part of simply observing your experience. So we all have thoughts, we all have feelings, we all have these stimulus that comes to us through our senses. And what Vipassana helps us to do is to learn, rather than to be identified with it, to be attached to it, or to be triggered by it, just simply to observe it. To observe the experience of what comes up in our realm of experience, whether that's through our thoughts, our feelings, our sensations, or anything else. Noises that you might hear, there are different stimuli that come to us. Okay? How many times have you experienced situations in your life where you get sucked into the experiences? No matter what it is, right? Stress, all these different things, triggers, right? Addictions at times, if you're feeling emotional, these are all the things that come up and that we're identified with and we're triggered by and we're attached to. And it's not saying that that's not a part of life, because I believe that is a part of life, but when it takes total control of us, then we lose our own power. And in my opinion, the Buddha was, to me, was just a scientist. I don't actually look at him as a religious figure. A lot of people think, and a lot of people follow Buddhism as a religion. I don't. I believe Buddhism, is a psychology more than a religion. It's a freeing. Buddha was kind of like one of the first psychologists who said, "This is how you can free your mind, so that you're not always longing or suffering or being affected by the different thoughts, situations that come up." It doesn't mean that you stay detached and you don't care and that you don't show compassion. It just means that you are in control rather than being controlled.
When you say to find your center or to find, what do you mean by that?
Okay.
What does that mean?
All right. Have you ever heard of the analogy called monkey mind? All right. Think of a monkey jumping in a tree from branch to branch, right? I've seen a lot of them in India, northern India. When you see them, they're just like, they're all over the place. Have you ever experienced your mind like that, where your mind is just here thinking about that, thinking about this, thinking about, and it's kind of like, it's like you don't have control over. Your mind's taken off, and you're like, oh my God, and you're going for the ride. Okay, so being centered is just having the ability to calm that monkey mind, so the monkey sits still. It's not jumping all over and leading the way and taking you on the trip along with you. It's just being able to empty your mind of perhaps intrusive thoughts or things that will take your attention different places and you feel like you're out of control with them. To give you an example, one of the basic meditations that I learned as a kid that helped me out was just centering your attention on breathing in and breathing out. And you'll find that your mind, if you're used to having it jump around to different things, will try to do that. It'll say, this is boring. Remember, we got to do this later today. Did you turn the stove off at home before you left? What about so-and-so? Aren't you supposed to call them? And it just keeps going on and on and on and on. And sometimes without even your awareness of that taking place, you're already into it, and then you go, wait a minute, I don't think I'm supposed to be thinking about all these things. So this is the monkey mind. That's the analogy of the monkey mind. The breath awareness meditation is just to give you some control over that, so that it's not jumping around so much. So that's what I mean. If your mind jumps consistently and constantly like that, then when we do Vipassana meditation, it can be difficult to remain as an observer rather than a participant of your thoughts. And that's really what Vipassana is all about, is just being an observer rather than being, getting involved in them like we often do. We get involved in a lot of what comes up in our life. And it's just liberating us from that. It doesn't mean that at some point in our life we can't take action on things, but it would be nice to be more clear-minded and have perhaps a better definition of what's the best course of action than led by perhaps things that we're not in control of. Which is this breath awareness meditation. So go ahead and locate your breath right now. And the reason I say that is because we're so used to not even knowing that we breathe, really. I mean, we just do it because we have to. It's something that happens. But when I say locate your breathing, where is your breathing right now? Are you breathing high up in the chest area, or middle ways down, or do you draw the breath all the way down to the lower stomach area? Are you aware of how far down the breath actually comes? How does your body react to that breath? Do you feel your chest move? Do you feel your stomach move? How long are the pauses between each breath? Just notice this for a moment. Do you pause before you breathe in again, or do you breathe in right away? Do you pause before you breathe out? Or do you breathe out right away? Okay. And now as you put your attention back on me for a second, what was that like for you?
Comforting.
Okay. And in which way would it be comforting in your experience?
Because I was focusing on my inner, the breathing. I was totally in tune with my body, how it was kind of, the mechanics of it, how it was working. And I was oblivious to the outside world.
Isn't it amazing when you just take something so simple as breathing and you put your attention, almost how a lot of the stress levels that we're under because we're thinking so much and our body's so tense, that we have a chance to relax. Just have a chance to let go of some of the stuff that we deal with each day. And our body, if you do this long enough, if you do this on a regular basis, you'll feel your body go through these stages of relaxation where it just kind of drops away a lot of the tension. Because the body and the mind are so interconnected that even when you think you're not under stress, a lot of the times your mind's ticking away. And when that's happening, your body is holding stress. I mean, believe it or not, it does. And I found this out one of the first times about 25 years ago when I visited a tranquility tank, or also known as deprivation tank. Does anybody know what that is? Where you slide into the water and they close the flap, the door, and then it's soundproof, lightproof, and it's about 1,000 pounds of Epsom salt, so you float on top of the water. And it's big enough, usually, at least back then, they were big enough that you didn't touch the side, so you float in the center, so you can't really get a feel of where you are because you're floating. It feels like you're in space, actually. And you don't hear anything, you don't see anything, so you're not stimulated by those particular senses, except for what's going on in your own mind. And when you come to terms with that, what's going on in your own mind, And you realize, you know, it's just you in your mind. I mean, that's the only thing that's there. And I felt this huge shift in the tension that I'd been holding in my body, and it just kind of went, phew. And then another 10 minutes later, it did it again. While I'm laying in the water. And I just couldn't believe these incremental, you know, releasing of bodily tension, because my mind was settling down, had no stimuli. And yet I was very conscious. And I found the same thing as I began and continued to meditate, that my body would go through these stages as well, because I've been holding so much tension of the activity of my mind. So let's do this again, and then we'll take some more experience, you know, comments and experiences. But once again, locate your breathing. Just put your attention on the full breath, in and out. Notice if your breaths are long or short. Not trying to control the breathing right now, we're just noticing it. If your mind starts to think about something, if other thoughts come into your mind, just return your attention back to the breathing process. Just gently. Nothing has to be forced. And you can put your attention back on me for a moment. So there's a few more minutes of breath awareness meditation. Anybody else like to comment on what their experience was with that?
I noticed the first time we started, and you said, where's the breath? It was all up high, and it was probably sort of like a tense kind of breathing. And the second time we started, it was quite a lot lower.
Wow. So
even between the two times.
Yeah. The amount of relaxation that took place just between that, you know, in a short period of time allowed you to breathe deeper.
And I noticed quite a difference, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, monkey mind started to slow down a little more and sucking around.
Yeah. And just off of that comment, your monkey mind, and again, that's just an analogy, but the busyness of your mind, or the scatteredness, or, you know, because the mind it's been trained to be busy, to deal with what we need to deal with on a daily basis. But at times, I remember when I first started doing this meditation as a teenager, and I'd be sitting there, and I'd have these kind of strange thoughts come into my head, like, does everybody else look as funny as I feel right now? Or, you know, like, is everybody thinking the same thing? Or, like, why is it so quiet? Or, you know, we going to be doing this for a long time or just a short time? Is it almost over? Or do I need to, you know? And this is a part of that monkey mind analogy, is that these things will come in. And a lot of times, just because it's foreign, we're not used to being still without being stimulated in some way, visually, auditorily, kinesthetically. You know, we're used to having some sort of constant stimulation unless we're going to sleep and we're unconscious. So this time, I'm going to get you to actually draw your breath deeper consciously as you're doing it. So if you notice that your breathing was down here already, that's great. If you notice that your breathing was a little higher, then we're going to put some conscious attention on just drawing it down to the lower stomach area. And this is where my belly button is here. I'm focusing just a little bit below that area. In the Chinese tradition, this is called the dantian, and in Japanese, it's called the hara. This is a very powerful point in martial arts. It's what we know of as the center of your being, okay? Because it really is the center of you, between bottom and top. Okay? So everything from that philosophy of martial arts starts here. So when you're drawing your breath down deep, just notice that this area expands slightly. And then relaxes as you breathe out. So take a couple of moments now and focus on that. The only thing you really want to do, whether you're laying down or sitting up, is just maintain a straight back. Okay? So that the windpipe has full access to the air and it's not kinked like a garden hose would be. You know how if you kink a garden hose, the water doesn't get through properly? Well, you want to keep that so it's straight in the water. The air can come in and out very easily. Okay, so go ahead and take a few moments. You can do it with your eyes open, or you can do it with your eyes closed. If you find that you're bombarded by stimuli visually, and that keeps you from focusing on your breathing, you might want to close your eyes. Okay, but it's up to you. Would like to comment on their experience on that portion?
I found I laid down because the other two times I was pulled out by trying to hold my body up, and so I couldn't really put as much dedication to my breathing, but this time it made a big difference.
Okay. Same?
Not too loud.
Okay.
I found that I was getting monkey brain this time.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the first two times I didn't,
Mm-hmm.
but this time it was hard.
Started generating?
Yeah.
Got tired of sitting still, did it?
I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, and it'll happen, and there's no rhyme or reason or rhythm to the way that it happens. It you know, sometimes it'll let you think, oh yeah, everything's going good, everything's calm, and all of a sudden it starts jumping around, and you're like, hey, what happened? You know? And I kind of looked at it as a little game a long time ago, when I'd sit down and I'd say, I wonder when the monkey's going to start jumping around today. Because I knew at some point it was going to try to, and then it would just be working the technique of practicing the breathing. And eventually, if you didn't pay a lot of attention or try to force it too hard to rein back to the breathing, it would settle down. But it just takes practice. Like anything else, if you go to a gym, or if you're doing a sport, or and you're trying to get better at these things, You know, if you put repetition into lifting weights, you're going to build some muscle, but you have to put the repetition into it. You know, you can't just go and look at the weights and say, geez, I'd like to be, you know, have a better muscular physique. Just going and looking at them just kind of doesn't work, right? Like anything else, you know, I've been into martial art for years, and you know, I can't just think I'm Bruce Lee to make myself a better martial artist. I actually have to go through the movements and practice them. And so, same thing with meditation. A lot of people think, oh yeah, meditation's easy. And for some people, you know, it is fairly easy. They take to it quite naturally. But for others, it's not so easy. And it's just same as it is going to a gym or working on a sport or being an artist of some sort, playing an instrument. You know, you need to practice to be able to hone the skills. Same thing with meditation. You're honing the mental muscles of your mind.
The detached awareness, isn't it? If you are aware that the breath is long, well, that's fine. If you're aware it's short, that's fine too.
Yeah.
It's being the observer.
Yeah, and that's the bridge, you know, from that sort of centered meditation into Vipassana, is being the observer. What is your breath like? You know, and opening it up to what is happening in your realm of experience. And I taught this same meditation last week for somebody who wanted a private meditation for him and his family and friends. And so as we were going through this and we hit this stage where we're making that transition into Vipassana, all of a sudden people started saying, oh my gosh, I gotta go back to centering meditation because all these thoughts in my mind, you know, and it's like, what do I do with them all? They're all there. And I thought, yeah, this is what happens, because as soon as you accept that, you know, you're just going to pay attention to your thoughts, a lot of times they're going to come. They're going to start to flow like a river, because you're going to start to really observe how your mind works. Now we're going to open up our realm of experience and kind of like what we call a field meditation. We're just going to see what comes into the field. You probably haven't done it in a while, but have you ever as a kid sat down on the grass and watched the clouds? Or maybe you have. Maybe I like to do it in the backyard where I sit down and I watch it. Have you ever watched the clouds go by? That's exactly what it's like. Here you are in your meditation and a thought comes. Now you have a choice. You can hold that thought and that cloud can stay right over you. Not saying that you can do that, you know, in the backyard or anything, but in your mind it can stay, or you can just watch it, observe it, and say, oh, there goes another thought. And just watch them pass by. Bring your attention back for a moment now. So, what was your experience like? Would you like to share?
Excuse me. I found that I had to start counting because my mind was everywhere.
Ah.
So
Okay.
by counting 7 in, 7 out, it kept me focusing on at least my breathing and nothing else.
Okay. So you needed to head back to the centering. Okay.
And then when I close my, oh sorry.
No, go ahead.
When I closed my eyes, I was actually thinking about solutions to the thought that were coming. I'm a problem solver. So anything that comes to my mind, I have to solve. So when my eyes were closed, I was trying to solve it, but when I had them open, I was actually observing it.
Okay.
I wasn't putting thought into what if and how and when.
Okay, thank you.
I think my mind works backwards. When we were doing the breathing meditation, my thoughts were all over the place. And as we started this, I'm sitting here thinking, okay, thoughts, where
Yeah.
are you?
That's true.
Because I'm sitting here thinking, there's no thoughts there.
Because we're allowing ourselves to think.
I know. And gradually thoughts came in.
Yeah.
And they weren't tremendous thoughts. You know, it was like hearing the birds or thinking about the clouds or whatever. But it was, at the first part, I almost started laughing because my mind was so quiet then.
It's true.
Anybody else?
Actually, that's funny you say that, Bronwyn, because I actually had a very similar. It was like, okay, my mind's blank. And then I realized, no, it's not, because I'm thinking that my mind's blank. My mind isn't blank.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I observed, like, I always sit like this, and this is my little tension barometer, and I realized I was pressing pretty hard, and I went, oh, okay.
Mm.
And then
Yeah.
things started to settle better. Even though I thought there was no thoughts, there were thoughts.
Yeah. Anybody else?
What I found was almost as soon as I started breathing, I thought, wow, my God, my body temperature went so high, I just wanted to go like that. And then I thought, wait a minute, I don't have to do anything about this. And then I was going, my hand's itchy. And it was so interesting because I said, I don't have to do anything about that. And it went away.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized, this is exactly a metaphor for my life. I don't have to do something about everything. I can just let it go.
Mm-hmm.
And especially if it's somebody else's stuff, you deal with that. You handle it.
Yeah.
And that was really profound for me.
Thank you for that. When you put enough time into Vipassana meditation, you really realize how reactionary we are off of the things that come up for us. We react, and a lot of the time it's so instant that we don't even recognize the space between the thought and the reaction. It just seems one, because we're so used to it. But when you start doing Vipassana on a regular basis, you start getting that, and you go, wait a minute. I just noticed that that was a thought first, because I just had the impulse to do this, and it was because it came to my mind, and I thought, and then my body started to move to scratch or to adjust or to, and I'm taking some basic examples, but you start to get it. Wow, wait a minute, I'm really into the reactionary stage. Vipassana has helped tremendously in a lot of different areas, especially with ailments like post-traumatic stress disorder and depression. There's a part of your brain called the amygdala. And in post-traumatic stress disorder patients and in depression patients, they've been able to measure the amygdala. And basically what happens is it gets bigger because there's more gray matter, because of the more neuron sort of functions that take place there. There's more gray matter in that area, and the amygdala is the part of the brain that really controls the fight or flight syndrome that we experience through stress and anxiety and things like this. Okay? And so with patients, with PTSD and depression, they notice that area is significantly larger than somebody without it. On the other hand, the hippocampus, which is responsible for sort of memories, short-term memories, and recall and emotional sort of stability, they noticed that area at times, when you meditate, can be larger if you're meditating and you're actually devising these sort of strategy programs on being able to let go of things. And the amygdala starts to shrink back to where it should be. And they've done this experiment actually, not on just on people, but obviously they've put like mice in a maze, and they've made them stress out over running over the cheese, and they can't find it, whatever, and they've measured their amygdala, and they said, yeah, even this is something where if you have a stressed out mouse for 2-3 weeks, their amygdala actually grows larger because they can't figure out how to deal with it, and so there's more gray matter in that area, which is creating more of a problem. And then they monitored, even when they put them back into a safe environment, they monitored these mice again, and 3 weeks, a month afterwards, their amygdala is still very large, and it's creating them to shy away from any experiences that would be normal, like becoming more in touch with other mice or enjoying social activities, things that you would usually do because of that enlarged amygdala. So some of the science that is coming out in relation to meditation and Vipassana and meditation in general is that you start to balance out a lot of your systems in some of these areas in the brain that have been altered because of stress or anxiety, or the way that we're thinking all the time, start to balance out. Maybe not immediately, from the first point that you start meditating, but with repeated practice, this is what the result is. And with the advent of technology today, it's easy to monitor. They have the systems now through MRIs and EEGs and stuff to be able to measure what's taking place. And they're finding now that a lot of our health problems, 90% of our health problems, they say, are caused by stress. And a lot of that is due because our amygdala is running this information all through, and is perceiving that a lot of the things we endure on a daily basis, relationship challenges, financial challenges, work challenges, busyness with how busy we can get it, all this runs through our amygdala, and our amygdala is like, okay, this is a threat, this is not good, and so it starts pumping the hormones into our body because it communicates and it says, hey, release adrenaline, because you need it to get through this threat. And then, of course, if you're having that on a regular basis, then cortisol gets released, and cortisol is even more damaging of a hormone long term. And so it does more damage to the body, and of course stress is going to attack whatever area of your body is the weakest, so it moves into that area and attacks it. So the idea with meditation is, how do we zero that out? How do we, instead of build on the amygdala's gray matter, and make it bigger because it's so fearful, how do we bring it back to just, hey, you know what? It makes sense to run from a fire. if a car is coming at you, straight at you, it makes sense to jump out of the way. And it would be nice to have a little adrenaline to quicken that step, But, half the things in life don't require adrenaline. They don't require these things that are running through our body, creating havoc. So wouldn't it be nice to be able to simply observe how this all takes place and be able to assess, instantly, instead of react and say, this is just not that important. This is not just not that important. Thank you, amygdala. I appreciate that you're trying to protect me all the time and trying to, keep the human race going. Thanks very much. But, this is my life, and I want to live it without having to activate the sympathetic nervous system all the time. So this is one of the benefits of meditation that they found. And again, although meditation might seem like it comes from the Far East, there's been meditation, in the Christian faith, there's meditation in all kinds of different faiths, so it's not really faith-based. For me, it's something that is more based in psychology, on how to free our mind and benefit our body. And I'm just so thankful that nowadays science is starting to teach the same thing, because when I started doing this and started teaching it to all my friends, they said, you should have been born a hippie, because the hippies are into that. And I said, well, maybe they are. Maybe they're getting something out of it that's real that other people don't want to get out of it. Now, lots of people are doing it, and you're not a hippie, and you don't have to live in a commune or be be a Zen monk or anything like that. Meditation's good. Let's just go through some of the key points here. Whether it's a thought, whether it's a sensation, whether it's a noise or something that comes in through your senses, because there's noises in the building here. You know, you'll hear people going upstairs, you'll hear water going through pipes, or car horns sometimes. You know, these things will happen. You might feel it hot in here, or you might feel it cold in here at times. These are all sensations. Unless it really bothers you to the point where it's like totally uncomfortable and you just can't take it anymore. You know, say you have an ache or something like that, then do something about it. But in the beginning, just observe it. Observe whatever comes into your field of awareness, no matter where it comes from, whether it's from the outside or the inside of you. And just observe it. And like anything else, non-judgment, you know, when you're doing this, non-attachment, don't try to say, oh, it's this. Oh, I know what this is. This, you know, you're identifying it because that's what you've been taught. No, just observe it for what it is, whatever it is in that moment. Okay. So go ahead. If you find a thought triggers a feeling, witness it. Witness, observe what it is of the feeling, or the thought, or the sensation. Anybody else?
I got some clarity out of something, something big actually. Yeah, and then when I got the clarity, I thought, oh wow, this is something I've been working on for a long, long time. Knowing something was not right, but not knowing what it was. Mm. And so I got the clarity around that. And then I thought, okay, am I supposed to do something with this? You know, to balance it out, or I'm not sure. Mm.
Opportunity to be in India and be at the same location where Buddha was enlightened. Almost the same tree. It's the third generation of the same tree anyways, because for whatever reasons it was destroyed a few times, and then there were original saplings sent to like Sri Lanka and other places, and then they bring back an original sapling, you know, part of the tree or whatever, and plant it again. Anyways, the current tree is just humongous. And I'd spent almost a week doing meditation around the tree, whether it was sitting meditation or walking meditation or contemplation. And there's tons of, you know, countries who are Buddhist in nature who come there and they do their chanting and they do their talks, and they, you know, it's like any other religious pilgrimage place where there's just tons of people. But you can do your own thing, or you can join in a group, or, you know, whatever, and there's lots of monks. And so as I was doing my daily meditation, you will get people coming up to you and saying, oh, where are you from, and, you know, what do you do, or, you know. And sometimes I just remain silent, because a lot of times it was Indian tourists, and, you know, they want to chat you up. And I remember sitting there one time, and one Indian tourist says, oh, must be mad or something because he's not talking. And the other says, hits him on the arm and says, can't you see he's meditating? But anyways, you know, when you're there for a while, you know, people will say, oh, have you met so-and-so from whatever part of the world they come from? He's been here for like 6 months, and, you know, he's been meditating, and he's really knowledgeable every time I talk to him. And I said, no, I haven't had a chance to meet him. Oh, you really should, you know, he really knows a lot, and he can tell you all the blah, 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 and you know, just goes on. And I said, well, I look forward to having the opportunity to meeting him, but, you know, I generally don't go to my way to make that happen. If it happens, it happens. So on my second last day, I'm sitting around the tree, I was doing a little meditation, and it was just outside of the main area, so you can see the tree, and it hangs out over one of the barriers that the tree's in. And there were some Indian tourists coming around, and one guy reaches up and he grabs a whole handful of leaves from this sacred Bodhi tree and he just rips them down, right? And these are worth money because you can sell them on the street and make money in India. Probably other places too. Well, this guy that, you know, I was told who is really knowledgeable and everything, he just had a major you know, outbreak of the sympathetic nervous system because he just jumped up out of meditation and he just started yelling at these guys who ripped these leaves down. And he just, what do you think you're doing? And you could just see the beads, you know, coming down his face, and he just took such great offense that somebody would do this, and to the point where he's yelling and screaming at them, and you know. And I was still in meditation, so I'm thinking, like, you know, I understand, you know, want to respect things like this, but, you know, a few leaves aren't going to kill the tree, right? And I'm thinking, I really don't even think Buddha would care, you know. I'm sure he just sat by the tree because it was shady, you know. It was a good place to rest your back, you know. But this major reaction that this guy had, and it came to me that there's a lot of people who know a lot of things, but they don't necessarily practice them, you know, to get the result of the intellectual capacity that they have. And I think it's better to know less and to practice more.
Yes.
What you want to do with this session here now, when we leave, is you want to practice it, of course, in a peaceful place, but where it really comes in useful and where it really comes in handy is in your everyday life, especially when you run into challenges and problems. It's not like, oh, I only meditate when things are calm and peaceful. The benefit of this is when you run into a circumstances and you have your sympathetic nervous system kick in, then wouldn't it be nice to be able to be mindful or to be Vipassana-like, you know, and just observe what's taking place rather than have to react to it. And this is something that, for me, was so liberating as a teenager with my father. For whatever reason, the sickness of alcoholism in my father, you know, you'd come home after school or, you know, and he'd be in a drunken stupor, and his main mission was to get everybody miserable because he was miserable, and misery loves company. And if you came in happy, his main job was to try to beat you down until you got into a point where you were argumentative and just totally unpeaceful, and that was his main focus. And when I came, you know, from the meditation sessions, and I thought, yeah, you know, bring this home with me. And I started bringing it home, and he couldn't get a reaction out of me. He couldn't trigger me the same way anymore. And he tried harder, of course, because he couldn't figure out why the same old stuff wasn't working out. And I found that as I just let it slide away and I thought, you know, if that's the kind of state of mind that you want to be in, go for it. You know? But I don't have to allow that to control me. You know? And it was liberating. It was hugely liberating for me, because I would always get drawn into a desperate yelling match, screaming and, you know, threatening each other and all kinds of things. And by the end of the night, you're just totally spent. I mean, you know, I didn't even feel like getting up and going to school in the morning. Being dragged up to the kitchen table at 2 o'clock in the morning so that he can have a conversation with me. You know, you got to wake up at 7 and be at school by 8:30 or whatever. You know, you just don't feel like going anymore. So for me, I found that taking the meditation that you learned, that I learned about that, and bringing it into the situations that perhaps you most needed it. There really shouldn't be a separation. Oh, I only meditate when things are peaceful. So what you're saying is that, you know, it only works when things are peaceful. That's not what it's designed for. It's designed to bring into situations where life happens, stuff happens, and to be able to utilize it there. Okay. Any questions or comments? Can I read you another quote if not?
Wait a minute.
Right.
Well, if you're in that situation, do you start going, okay, am I breathing? You know?
No.
Somebody's yelling at
you.
You
could.
Sit there and breathe?
If you
like,
wanted
do
to
you do?
center yourself,
what
you
would
could
be the
just focus
tool?
on your breathing to center
okay,
yourself.
so while your eyes are open so they don't know you're doing
Yeah.
that, because
Yeah.
they probably would wake up, because I close my eyes. I mean, here I'm closing my eyes.
Yeah, and this doesn't need to have, you don't need to have your eyes closed. We're just doing it right now to get the basic concept
I
of it.
know, but I just wanted to take a step further.
Yeah.
To, like, how did you manage to?
With my eyes
do
open.
that? Yeah.
And fully engaged in the situation without being reactionary to it. Present in the situation. It is hard to do because your whole training, your whole conditioning wants you to lash out or to, you know, to get into it or to feel certain ways. But when you do the meditation enough, you start recognizing that those are reactions, those are triggers that you have, and you don't have to do that. You don't have to meet that person at their level of thinking. So yeah, the idea of this is to be in life fully, you know, engaged in it and to be able to be an observer of a lot of things. And that doesn't mean that, you know, if your life is threatened, you sit there and observe it and go, you know, wow. You know,
Wow, man.
I'm about to,
This is it. This is
you know,
it.
yeah, I'm about to get hit by this car that's racing at me.
Wow, great.
When do I stop observing this? You know, I mean, there are definite and real times when the amygdala is useful. So let's not, you know, hasten.
Hasten death.
Yeah, or injury of any sort.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the last step with my father is he got so so pissed at me that he couldn't get the reactions out of me that he wanted. That we got near to, you know, I mean, he threatened me physically and threw me around a little bit. And at that time, I could have kicked his ass because I had enough training in martial arts that I could have did some serious damage. And I chose not to. But at the same time, as his fist was near my face, you know, I knew that if it came down to it, I would have to protect myself because, you know, I don't necessarily want my nose broken or anything, you know. And it was then and there that I realized that he was not going to deal with his temperament or his disease. You know, he tried AA and he tried things, but he never stuck with it. So I had to make a decision. Either I live in this situation, let it escalate to where it's now turning to violence on a regular basis, or I choose that it's no longer a healthy situation to be a part of when it gets to that point that, you know, the person's trying to continue to spur you on and is getting violent. So I left, you know, and I never went back. And then my mother ended up leaving as well because she got tired of putting up with the abuse. And my sister left a long time ago because she was older. And unfortunately, my father never got his act together. And as much as we tried to help him, and, you know, he never wanted or took that help, and he ended up dying as an alcoholic. And a very lonely death because he ostracized everybody.
You had the option though to leave. What if you can't leave? What if that person?
Well, for a long time, I did not have the option to leave because I was, you know, young and I had to deal with it. But when it did come down to physical violence, I think there has to be a point where you have to have a plan B in the situation. And it's not always easy to have a plan B. But when you're being threatened physically with violence, you have to figure something else out because nobody needs to live under those circumstances.
It could also be an emotional situation where it's so intense that if it's in your own space, I'm not going to leave my house. You know,
Yeah, and
how do you get rid of that?
I was able to deal with those the emotional, you know, I mean, the mental and emotional abuse that I you know, suffered. I was able to deal with that no problem. I mean, it was a problem when I was early, but as I got into the meditation and I was able to deal with it in my own mind, I could live in that environment and handle it because I had other support systems outside of it, but it escalated and continued to escalate and I had to make a decision. So it can be endured. Not that I think that everybody should have to endure it, but that's a personal decision. And everybody has their own reasons for staying or leaving. And everybody has their own threshold of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable anymore. And all I can say is that if you feel that you are being beaten down and you have no energy and you can't function anymore in life to a point where you've lost a lot of quality in your existence, in your life experience, you have to start contemplating if that's the environment that you want to be around. And yeah, it could be scary looking at making changes, but the alternative is you can continue to have your spirit, beaten and tread upon to the point where you may not be in a position to live life to the fullest. So decisions are one of those things in life that we all have to make. But I can tell you, meditation will definitely help you in those situations, but it's you who has to make the final decision in relation to whether it's worth being around it or not. The essence of it is the same, which is observing, being a witness to your experience, rather than being sucked into it or triggered by it automatically and reactionary all the time. Just observing it. And that gives you the power then at that point to choose and to decide whether it's worthy of your attention or not. But how can you make that decision of whether it's worthy of your focus and attention or your action, which is the next step, if you have no control over it, if it controls you?